Bluefin Registries Tails Up Podcast, episode number 4. The Bluefin Registry is a virtual museum of fishing tales. We are dedicated to promoting and preserving the stories, sport, and spirit of bluefin tuna fishing while attempting to capture a piece of Americana. Our goal is to increase awareness by interviewing and recording bluefin tuna fishermen and industry experts from coast to coast and sometimes from around the world. And who knows, maybe we'll learn a thing or two along the way that will help us bring our fishing skills and understanding of the delicate issues surrounding the bluefin tuna to the next level.
Hey, this is Captain Jeff Fonts from Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters, and you're listening to the Bluefin Registries Tails Up podcast.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Jay Scott, your host of the Bluefin Registries Tails Up podcast, and welcome to episode number 4. We're psyched you're joining us today, and we're glad you're joining our community here at the Bluefin Registry, and we have brought a great lineup for you today. We're going to talk all about custom rods and how they can improve your fishing for bluefin tuna and other species as well. And we got to talk to Captain Jeffrey Fonts from the Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters out of Newburyport, Massachusetts. They have a fantastic rod building facility down there. In fact, so good that most of the guys and most of the captains from the Wicked Tuna Show use their rods. That's how good these things are. So we went deep. We got to talk about everything we needed to know for the novice all the way up to the experienced person and what other kinds of improvements you can make to your rods. You can even bring in a rod from just your favorite rod you have now that might even be a factory built one and say, hey, these are the features I like on this rod and I want it to be special and custom and make it mine. And that's what Jeff does down there with his dad. So I'm not going to chit chat too much about this. So I'm just going to go right over to the interview. Hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody. This is Jay Scott, your host of the Bluefin Registries Tails Up podcast, and we have a very special guest with us today, speaking with Jeff Fonts from Real Easy Custom Rods. Jeff, welcome to the Bluefin Registry.
Hi, how are you?
We're doing pretty good. What's happening in your neck of the woods?
Not too much. Just getting ready to work on some fishing rods, actually.
Very nice. Jeff, where are you located?
The business is actually located in Newburyport, Mass.
Okay. Very nice. And we're here to talk about rods today.
Yes, sir.
And I want to know everything there is to know. I want to know, like, from how you got started in it to what the novice needs to know to get started to what the experienced guy can learn from you. And take his game to another level. So,
okay.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from Newbury, or you're in Newburyport, where you're from?
Yeah,
how'd you get in the craft?
The company is based in Newburyport. Actually, I grew up in Newburyport, and my dad runs the business for the most part out of Newburyport. I live in Central Mass, so, we're kind of working on rods in two different places, but, the way we got into the whole business was, when you go down the marina in the summertime, there's, hundreds of boats at the marina, and you start talking to other people. And, one time this guy said, oh yeah, I make custom rods. And we took a look at them, and my dad thought there's nothing spectacular. They look nice, but we're going to give it a try. If you can make rods, I bet we can too. And what started as a hobby, making rods, giving them away to friends, giving them away to family, suddenly turned into, a guy that I actually went to high school with, who was running a local bait and tackle, said, I want to sell your rods in the store. And we made a few for him. He said, these are great, but you know what? This is what I would do different. Or my customers said that maybe you should try this. And ever since then, we've been kind of on a roll.
Gotcha. What year was that?
We started doing that in, I don't know, just to put a time on it, 2006.
2006, okay. And you're making some kick-ass rods from what we can tell.
Yes.
Yep. Now, what did you decide was your method? I mean, you looked at somebody else's rods and then you decided that I can do this better?
It at first was can I actually do this? Can I actually make my own fishing rods? And the answer was yes. And then just like, making anything or being a craftsman or an artist, you find ways to get faster and make the finishes better or make the product look different.
Yep.
For my dad and I with this company, we're not into making, art pieces that look good on a wall. We're making something that looks very nice, but also performs incredibly well. And in our opinion, possibly better than anything that you can buy in a store.
That's awesome. The tools or the rods you're making are specifically or generally for tuna fishermen?
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, we are a custom rod builder, so if you came to me and said, I want a rod to catch salmon with in Alaska, and you had a favorite rod that maybe you were using and I could get the specs on that, I can build it, But where we are geographically in Newburyport and, in the Ipswich Bay area where a lot of tuna fishermen fish out of, that was starting to become a product that people wanted more and more of, so we decided to just ramp up the quality and build stuff that, people said, wow, I've seen rods before, but I haven't seen one this nice.
Right.
We make a lot of different style rods. I mean, we make jigging rods or spinning rods, and we would love to sell 150, 200, 300 spinning rods a year, but the reality is you can go into the store and buy a Shimano Therese for, $150 or whatever. And it's a spinning rod.
Right.
But when you go into the store to buy a tuna rod and you look at the price tags, they're really not all that far off of, a custom product.
Okay.
So for us to make a custom product, you're not really spending all that much more money to have a product that's, your true product. It's exactly the way you want it, the colors, your name, whatever you can imagine or think of, we can do it.
Gotcha. Well, that's a good point right there. So you can make a custom rod that's as good as any rod out there or better. And you can pick exactly how you want it to look, exactly how you want it to feel, and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
When you have a customer come to you, let's talk about tuna rods in particular,
sure,
because of our audience. What's the first thing that a customer would do when they wanted to make their own custom tuna rod?
If they wanted to make one?
Yeah.
I know the first thing that I would do, and let's say that I didn't build rods, is I would go online probably.
Okay.
And I would see who's using what. And then I would try to find out maybe why they're using it. And I would obviously look at the different manufacturers out there that make rods, Penn, Shimano, Stewart, all those companies. And then, you got to do a little bit of reading to find out kind of where to put the guides or whatever. But, honestly, it's just a lot of research into, what size butt should I use? What length rod should it be? Where should I buy the blank? And you just kind of start putting the pieces together, and then, one day maybe you order all the stuff and you just decide, okay, well, we're going to build this thing, and you just take it step by step.
All right. So that sounds pretty complex to me. All right. And I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that may want to try that on their own.
Yeah,
right.
Sure.
So let's scratch that. All right. I want to go to somebody that knows how to do this. Somebody that makes a great rod. What's the first thing that, let's say I wanted to build a rod, what would I do? I would come see you and then what would you do then? Have a conversation?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the most popular way of reaching out to us and communicating with us on having a rod built is surprisingly Facebook. I mean, we are in retail stores, but most often people, reach us on Facebook and they ask us, hey, I'm looking for this type of rod and can you do it? And then my answer is yes.
Right.
90% of the time. So, usually what happens, the first thing someone will say is, I need a rod. I say, great. What do you want? Well, I don't know. Okay, well, I can help you with that too. So I find out where you fish, what you fish for, what you fish with rod and reels.
Okay.
And then we basically start asking questions. So most of our customers, most of the people that are coming up to us are approaching us about a first-time rod buyer, which we encourage too, because we make, from the most basic and inexpensive rod to the most expensive rod you could buy. But what happens is someone approaches us and I say, okay, well, what do you want? And if they don't know, I'll explain the differences between the types of rods that we make. But an experienced guy will come up to me and say, I want an 80 class rod, or I want a 130, or, well, what else do you have? And so if somebody wants an 80, really simply put is they just pick their colors, the type of guides that they want, and we build it.
Okay. All right. So it's really that simple. You say what my reel is like, and then what I'm fishing for.
Exactly.
And what colors do you want?
Yeah.
And then you'll take care of the rest.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. All right. So you're connected to the guys from Wicked Tuna by the looks of it on your Facebook page.
Yes, we are.
And tell us about how you got connected with those guys, and do all these guys fish with your rods?
Almost all of them do. This year we are kind of going to be a little bit more visible, if you will.
Okay.
We're now on almost every single one of the boats except for one, and that boat was previously fishing with our gear, but with the types of sponsorship that's out there right now for these guys, they went with a different rod maker for the season.
Sure, understandable.
So, we're by no means a gigantic company, so we're not spending any sort of crazy amount of money to get people to fish with our gear. We are, if somebody wants to use our gear, then the power to them, So the whole Wicked Tuna thing started when we saw the show for the first time, just like most of the people in the fishing community that had heard of the show at the time, sat down on a Sunday night, turned it on, had some mixed emotions about, how they were going to make a show out of this. And then by the second episode, we were hooked. And my dad looked up at me and said, you know what? I'm going to email these guys. I'm going to get in touch with them and see if they will fish with our gear. So we made arrangements with quite a few of the boats, quite a few of the captains to get those rods on their boats. And really all we asked was that they put our logo stickers on, on visible parts of their boat. We signed release forms with National Geographic so that they wouldn't blur out our logo. And that's basically what happened. But the nice thing about that was these guys didn't they didn't need new rods, but they chose to fish with them and they love them. And right now we have, all those Wicked Tuna captains are recommending people to use our gear, and it's definitely snowballing.
Right. That's awesome. What makes your rod different than others?
Ooh, that's always a sticky question. It's a
tough one. I know it's a tough question.
It is a tough question, but there are plenty of rod builders out there. The biggest thing for us is that we use them. We fish with almost every single different rod that we come out with. We don't just build a rod and say, oh, this is our interpretation of what a good tuna rod is. We seek the feedback of the people that are fishing with them. And if they say that this rod is too stiff or too soft or the guides aren't in the right places for me, we make adjustments. And we know that they're the best out there because they're on so many boats up and down the East Coast, and they're all catching fish on them, and not a single one has broken. And it can happen. Right. It's an eventuality. But fish are being landed on them, and guys keep coming back time and time again to buy these rods.
Gotcha.
The biggest thing is that we're getting blanks that no other rod builder has access to because they're being made specifically for us. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I can say for how is it different when everyone's using the same blanks, the same components, the same glue, and it's all about the time and effort that we spend in making every single rod.
Well, that's interesting. Okay. So you've got your own blanks being made.
Yes.
Did you design them yourself?
We basically worked with a company that came out with a new model of blank, and I guess I can explain it. It's basically a hybrid blank. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what they call a Chatham Special. I didn't name it. I don't really call it a Chatham Special. It's basically an 80 class extra long.
Okay.
So a 7-foot 80 class rod.
Yep.
Now those rods are great because when you hook up, the tip is soft, so you don't have as high a probability as pulling a hook. So when that fish hits, it's a softer tip. The rod bends over and that hook sets and it stays. Now, for some guys, when you're fighting a 1,200-pound fish on an 80 class rod, it's a little too big of a fish for them. They think the rod bends too much, or they think the rod's going to break. Usually it won't happen, but what they've come out with is a rod that has a true 130 sized butt. I'm not talking about the curved butt. I'm talking about the diameter of the rod at the butt.
Yep.
And then the tip itself has an 80 sized and feel tip. So when that fish hits, it's going to hit and it's going to bend over, but the rod's got a substantial amount more backbone than an 80, and you're going to be able to basically shovel in some heavier fish.
Gotcha.
That particular rod, when we found out about it, only came in 5'8". So what we have done is we've gone ahead and had that rod made in a 7-foot version for guys who have outboards, for guys who want it just a little bit softer. Right now, 80 class rods are trending up, and they're really popular right now. A lot of the guys on the show are actually only fishing 80s. A lot of them will fish an 80 class rod with a 130 reel on it.
Gotcha. Okay. So you've got a specific blank that is unique to your business only, and you can't get that anywhere else. No.
I'm sure that maybe someone could ask for it.
Right.
And that's kind of why I was a little hesitant to talk about it, but, sooner or later, people are going to know about it, and they'll be asking for it, so,
Eventually, they'll figure it out. But But right now, you've got the market.
That's correct.
And you're ahead of them because you've already been working on this project. And when the market catches up with that, you'll be ahead of them too for the next thing.
Right. And that's the other big thing about being a custom rod builder. You can't just, want to be a good rod builder and then only make one type of rod and call it your product line. We're constantly coming out with how do we make these look better, or how do we make them work better? To a lot of people, the way they look is more important than what they do. And then, that's not most of my clients, but I have a few that want them to look nice. They want them to match everything.
Right.
And then I have a very large percentage of fishermen who don't care what they look like. They just want them to be able to go out on the boat, bend them, not break them, and pull fish in. And that seems to be what's happening. I mean, people are now calling us, whereas, say 2 years ago, we were calling people asking them, hey, tackle shop, do you want to buy this?
Right.
And now tackle shops, guys that run commercial boats, guys that run charters out of Prince Edward Island, they're calling us. Uh-huh. They've heard about, the quality.
Yep.
They've heard about what they look like. And more importantly, they've heard about the fish that have been caught on them.
That's a testament right there to the quality of your job that you're doing on these rods. You fish with these rods too, correct? You're not just rod makers, you're fishermen too.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. So you get to go out and test these things to make sure.
That's the best part of the job.
It's got perks, right? That's awesome. Tell me about the blanks. How do you have a choice if you want to have a rod built to which blanks you want to have put on?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yes. I mean, when we first started doing the Wicked Tuna rods, one guy in particular wanted a certain type of blank, and we said no problem. Just like any other business, you're always trying to find kind of a happy place between costs and what you're actually going to sell your rod for. And you could go out and buy the most expensive blank out there because it has a brand name, or you could buy another brand blank because the specs are spot on and they make a great blank and they're just not as well known,
Right.
But when someone asks for a specific blank, absolutely. You want a CalStar or you want a Seeker. We've even made rods on a company out of Washington. They make, they're called Batson Enterprise. They make, the Rain Shadow blanks. So there is a host of companies out there that have products that we can use to make your product better.
Okay.
Your product being your custom rod that you've picked out.
So I could bring a rod to you and say, hey, this is the rod I use now.
Mm-hmm.
I want to jack it up.
That's kind of one of my most fun. That's what I really like to do. My dad likes to kind of get 4 at a time for somebody, make them, make sure they're perfect, and then send them out. I really like it when someone brings me, it doesn't have to be a tuna rod. Say it's a 2-piece travel rod that they like to take down to the Cape and fish the canal for stripers, and maybe the top half broke off and they can't get it. I love that stuff because it gives you a chance to take your favorite rod of all time. I can match the blank or get something very, very close and then just make it awesome. The best guides, the best reel seat,
right?
Whatever you want.
That's pretty cool. I like that. That's kind of a cool concept. I love just, you walk in the door with something you kind of like, and I just want to make it the best rod I've ever had.
That's pretty
that. Neat. Now, when you talk about the different rods that in the blanks, do you buy different blanks to fit different size reels like 50s, 80s, and 130s?
That comes down to the components and not the blank itself.
Okay.
Like I was saying about those 80 extra longs, they're initially not made to have a number 6 butt, which is the size butt that you would put a 130 on them. But a lot of guys want to put a 130 on them. So, I have to take steps to make that butt fit on the rod rather.
Okay.
So, a stand-up rod will have a small butt, and then an 80 will have a number 4, and then a 130 will have a number 6. So, if you want a 130 with a 80 class style butt on it, I probably can't make that happen because I'd actually have to shave the blank down to make that happen. But if you said to me that you wanted to buy a tuna rod and you had like a Shimano 80, like a Tiagra, I would build a rod with a number 4 butt for that reel.
Okay. So you can do a bigger butt that might match an 80 or a 130, but you could have a 80 blank or something like that. Yeah.
That's the whole basis of what they called the Chatham Special, which was to put a number 6 butt to fish with a 130 on an 80 class rod. So you can imagine that when you're fighting that fish and you've got 40 pounds of drag on that reel, that rod's doubled over. The tip's probably in the water. And that's how a lot of guys like to fish right now. I always tell people, if you're gonna buy a rod, especially like an 80, because a 130 is gonna have a 130 on it no matter what.
Okay.
But if someone's gonna buy an 80, and they say they have 80s, but they're thinking about upgrading, then I recommend the bigger butt because you can always put an 80 on a bigger butt. You have to tighten it up pretty good to make it stay just the way it's supposed to.
Okay.
But you can't make a smaller butt bigger for a bigger reel.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. What about the guides? Do you change the guides up based off of the size of the rod, basically?
Yeah, I mean, the 80s and 130s, they have the same size guides on them.
Okay.
The stand-up rods are going to have a little bit smaller guide. The thing with the guides is that's really where the pricing comes into play. Unless you're buying a super expensive blank, the prices of the blanks are all pretty much the same. So if you want the top end of guides, you're going to spend the extra $1. that's why I can sell a rod to a guy that's just getting into tuna fishing, because I can sell him a rod that has, it's still a good guide, but it's going to be a less expensive guide.
Okay. Got it. What about the difference between the style of the butt between a straight or bent?
Okay.
Do you have different variations on that too?
Yeah. I mean, there's always, someone that's going to want to fish one way over another. And, if you order, for the most part, the straight butts are for the stand-up style rods. I know that we prefer to build our stand-up rods with a curved butt. But that's the thing. The most important thing is it's a custom rod. Any way you want it is how we're going to build it. So, I know a lot of my customers, they'll buy a brand new 130, and then they'll take the butt and they'll actually bend it another 15 degrees so that when the boat sways or goes up and down on a wave, that the rod doesn't move.
Okay. Are you building do different butts have different purposes, meaning that I should be fighting in a chair versus fighting in a rod holder? Kind of thing?
The curved butts are for, you can fish them stand up, you can fish them out of a chair, or you can fish them out of the rod holder.
Okay.
The stand up butt, the straight butt is more for stand up, but you can fish it out of a chair. But really, in my opinion, the straight butt makes things a little bit more awkward when you're trying to reel in the fish, because it puts the reel actually a little bit further away from you.
Okay. What about just like a harness, a stand-up harness?
Yeah. If you're in a harness, you can fish with a straight butt. And again, a lot of people prefer that curved butt because it just brings the reel closer to their body so that when they pump, they can put a good, couple cranks on the reel a little bit easier.
Yep. That makes sense. All right. What other things should our audience, our novice piece of our audience, what else do they need to know about building a rod that's going to work?
That's kind of a interesting question. That you got to consider things like, where did the materials come from, or who actually built it? Was it built in a factory? Was your $300 rod built with $250 worth of good components and a $5 blank?
Right.
That's probably the biggest thing that I see when I go, when we go to some boat shows, or we go to a sportsman show in Rhode Island every winter. There are a ton of rod builders out there, but when you look at the components, you want the components, every single component, to be as good as the next one, not having a really well-built rod made on a poorly made blank. It's not a good combination.
Okay. So these are the questions that you should be asking if you know nothing or next to nothing. These are the questions you should know. Okay. What about the guy who is experienced? What kind of questions would they ask, which is obviously different than the novice?
The biggest questions I get from experienced fishermen are, why should I use an 80 over a 130? Are ball bearing guides really necessary? Should I go with this brand of guide or that brand of guide?
Okay.
And, does it make a difference? And we're honest, if somebody came up to me and said, look, I have X amount of dollars to spend, and maybe that number is the top end rod that you could possibly buy, but what they're looking for isn't that kind of money, then I'm going to sell them what I think they should have, not, oh my God, they're going to spend this kind of money, I got to make them buy the best rod they could possibly get. I want their rod to match what they're really looking for. Perfect example, I just had a guy at a Newburyport buy 2 80s from us with Winthrop tool guides, and they make a special tip top called the Aussie top. It's an all titanium roller top, and it's got, you can stick a pencil through it. It's got huge knot clearance.
Okay. Wow.
He's a longtime fisherman out of Newburyport. He fishes on a down east style fishing boat.
Yep.
And his first question to us was, why should I buy the 80 over a 130? And he initially he just wanted to come check it out, see what we sold. And we showed him the 130. He said this 130, the particular 130 was looking at, is called a 130 XL. So it's a 6'6" 130. And we told him this one's going to be a little bit softer than your traditional 130. It's still not quite as soft. And then, he's like, I'm looking to get all new gear. So we're like, well, maybe you should try the 80s because this is really what the fishery is using right now.
Right.
And we showed him an 80, we bent it, we let him feel how it felt, and he liked the way it felt, but he still was undecided. So he asked a Shimano rep out of Connecticut. His name is Mike Deskin. He runs a boat, a charter boat called the Destiny. So they're friends, and he gets on the phone with them and says, I just can't make up my mind. I don't know what to do. He convinced them to buy the 80s. He's got a set of our 80s. He's fished with them. And he said, you will be so happy that you bought the 80s because it means, in a way, the way they're fishing them, less lost fish, faster times to get the fish in the boat because you're actually working the fish a little bit harder because the rod does bend quite a bit. So, that's probably the biggest thing that we get is, why should I use this component over another?
Okay. So if the fishery isn't really using 50s, basically, right?
No. Sports fishermen are, guys that are out there to have some fun, catch a fish that they're not going to sell.
Right. So those guys, the rec guys, are still using the 50s.
Yeah.
The commercial guys have gone to 80s.
80s, or there's guys out there that are still going to be using 130s.
Okay.
You have the kind of guy that's willing to take a 80 all the way out to George's, and then you have a guy that says, I'll fish my 80s inshore and I'll fish my 130s offshore. So it all kind of also plays into your style of fishing. For my dad and I, we fish inshore. We fish in Ipswich Bay or down on Stellwagen, and we don't need 130s.
And when you say you don't need 130s, what is the reasoning behind not using the 130s? Size of fish?
Yeah, I mean, the average fish that you're seeing inshore is anywhere between, 300 and 400 pounds. Obviously, towards the end of the season, you can start to see some bigger ones. I've had guys catch 795-pound fish on an 80.
Okay.
So I know that they're more than capable of bringing the fish in. And the other thing is, when you're fishing inshore and you've picked a certain spot, say you're only in 200 feet of water, your fish can't go down more than that, so you're not trying to bring in 1,500 yards of line,
right.
In a sea, with a 900-pound fish.
Right.
All the things that are going to stress your line and your equipment more than, if you're fishing inshore.
So it's more relative to the depth of the ocean that you're fishing and the size of the fish that you're catching in general.
Yeah, definitely the location of where you're fishing and how you fish. A lot of us don't fish with 130s because the gear that you used to be able to run on a 130, a 300-pound test mono with a 250-pound leader, you can't do that anymore. The fish are shy.
Yeah.
And they're not just shy, they're smart. That's why we fish with so much fluorocarbon, because they can't see it. And, on average, my customers are using like 170-pound fluorocarbon. And, if you put more than 50 pounds of drag on it, you're going to break it. So
right.
There's no need for a bigger rod inshore because you can't really turn the drag up. And I say this to a lot of people, the rod can only bend as so much with a certain amount of drag on it. So if you're fishing in 80 and you have a 400 or 500-pound fish on it and the tip of your rod is touching the water and you don't like that, you can back the drag off a little bit and play the fish out a little bit more.
Okay.
Or, I know I had a couple fish last year, and I had one in September that was about 350 pounds on a 130, on an 80, and that rod was doubled over, and he didn't seem any less strong than any other fish we've ever caught, but it only took us a half an hour to get him in the boat with the 80.
Gotcha. Okay. That's interesting. Now, what percentage of your customers use 130s versus 80s? would you say?
I would say that 25% of my customers are using 130s, and the other 75% are going with the 80s.
Okay. Gotcha.
I know on, like, if you just took the cross-section of the guys on Wicked Tuna, it would be 50-50.
Interesting. Okay. 50-50 across the board on Wicked Tuna. That's very interesting. Okay. As far as the guides themselves, are they all ball bearing kind of things?
No.
Rollers?
They attribute a lot to how much you're going to pay for a rod. And like I was saying, you know, when someone asks, oh, what should I buy? I don't immediately tell them that they need the roller ball bearing. A roller ball bearing is for a guy who is going to go fishing every single day. He's going to be catching 40 to 60 fish a year. He's the guy that's going to want them because he's not going to have to worry about any failure. If you have a roller that stops because of friction, it's going to end the day right there, you know, in terms of that rod being able to bring the fish in, you know, because it's just going to get hot.
Okay.
You know, for recreational, well, not even recreational, but even a commercial guy who fishes two times a week, maybe just on the weekends, the bushing is plenty. The bushings are rated at over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you can get your bushing up to that type of temperature, then you obviously have a pretty big fish on,
right.
But I have not seen it.
Is it possible to get it up that high with a big fish?
I would say it's possible when you're not maintaining your gear properly.
Okay.
You know, when in the off season, you know, you should be taking your guides apart and putting some grease on them. You know, that goes especially double for the ball bearing guides.
Okay. So it's knowing how to use your equipment and knowing how to fish. It comes into play as much as anything.
Yes.
Even though you have the best thing, you still got to know how to use it.
Right.
Gotcha. What about, and I don't need specifics, but as far as like wraps and epoxy and all that stuff, do you have specific kinds you use on different rods, for strength or things like that as well?
No, for the most part, we have, a couple different processes that we use. You know, when we first do the wrap, we use one type of epoxy, and then after that, we use another type of epoxy to just basically finish the rod and make it look nice. So, every rod in terms of the way we finish it is the same. And
Okay.
that's how we can ensure that they look as good as they possibly can, and then that the thread that we use to wrap the guides on is not going anywhere.
Okay. So you've got a semi-proprietary blank you're using. You've got a proprietary way in which you're finishing your rods with the wraps and the epoxies and all that stuff. And that's what's making your rods different than anybody else's.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I was trying to get to the bottom of. and I think we've gotten
Sorry
there.
for being long-winded.
No, you haven't. I want to go through every little piece to make sure that we understood why your rods are different and that they truly are. And I think you've proven that. As far as like, grips, are there different grips that you can choose from?
Yeah, there are. It's funny. A couple of years ago when we were really started getting heavy into, it was actually making only stand-ups. We had a guy, a bait and tackle owner, ask us for this certain style of grip, and it's like a EVA grip with notches cut out on the bottom for your fingers to grip on. And we said, whatever you want, we'll get them. Well, it turns out that another custom rod company, much bigger than us, like almost like a production facility, if you will, that was their thing, that grip. We couldn't get it anywhere else.
Gotcha. They
They would not sell it to us, and which was fine because actually the guy that owned the bait and tackle ended up getting those grips. So if you wanted to do a regular grip, EVA grip, you can have that. If you want it longer or shorter, you know, we can meet those requests. If you wanted just cork grip, we can do that too. You know, I mean, it would look kind of funny on a tuna rod, but sometimes we do that.
Right.
The big thing that we do, I think, and a lot of people are getting into it, is we use a material called X-Flock.
Okay.
It's like a rubber cover for your EVA, and it heat shrinks down onto the EVA, and so it form fits to the grip itself. And the biggest benefit of that is that the grip itself doesn't get destroyed by the sun, so you're not getting like, you know, if you ever had like an old grip, you get that black, like, I don't know, it's like chalky black marks on your hands or whatever.
Right.
So you don't get that. And the biggest benefit is it's really easy to clean, and it looks nice.
Right.
So, you know what, in terms of grips, I mean, you can put a short one, a long one. If you want one with some funky notch on it, we can do that. I know that on our jigging rods, we take an EVA grip, we modify it so that you've got a thumb rest for when you're jigging, you know. So really, it's an imagination thing. If you can imagine it, and then you can ask for it, and we can do it.
That's cool. What about different styles of fishing? Like, obviously, you know, there's the live bait fishing that seems like most of the guys do on Wicked Tuna. But what about trolling? Are there any? Should you have a different rod for trolling?
You know, it's funny because we talk about there not being a rod that does everything.
Yeah.
But if you're going to invest $700 to $1,200 in a rod, you should be able to use it for more than one style of fishing. So, you know, the down south towards the Cape and further south, a lot of guys are into stand-up. So those rods are, you know, specifically, for the most part, they're specifically trolled. And then when you get your fish on, you're going to harness into it and you're going to fight it. Right. I know that Billy Monty on the Bounty Hunter he's trolling with his new rods right now. The rods, they're rods that we provided with him, to him, and they are 130 extra long. So that's what he decided to go with. And so they'll troll with those. So you can troll with a tuna rod. It's not like a bass rod where you want the tip to be real light and the rod to have a lot of backbone to fish live bait. You actually want your tuna rod to be somewhat stiff so that when your fish is running around, the rod's not jerking up and down or moving all over the place. So, you know, in terms of live bait, the same rod that you troll with is going to be fine for the same rod that you're chunking or live bait fishing with.
Gotcha.
If you were fishing for sharks, and in which we have customers that do that,
yep,
I would be using an all fiberglass rod, a much stiffer rod than what you would get for a tuna fish.
Gotcha.
And you don't have to finesse a shark the way that you need to finesse the tuna fish.
I see. So you need to have the feel isn't as important with a shark.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Now you guys do charters as well.
That's correct.
Okay. So the name of your company is Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters.
Yeah, actually the real official name of the company would be Real Easy Inc.
Okay.
You know, so in terms of like what I use for the Facebook page, I use Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters. I probably at some point will, if I get another boat, come up with a new name and dedicate it just solely to doing the charter business, because it is kind of confusing. You know, when you go to look at my webpage, you're like, do they do charters or do they just make rods? Like, right. So, you know, that's something that we're kind of working on. I just recently got my captain's license and we haven't chartered in a few years. So we're getting back into doing that. And we had a few last summer and we have a few lined up for this summer, but we do charters. You know, you can find any of that information on Facebook if you just search Real Easy Charters and, Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters.
Okay.
Our webpage is also realeasyinc.com.
Okay.
It's pretty simple.
Nice.
The only reason we didn't, you know, decide to branch off and do another like Real Easy Charters page is because there are other charter boat companies out there. They're not in this country, but they are out there with the same name. So you don't want to be confusing everybody. But I think most of what we do in our charter business is word of mouth. You know, people that know who we are, know what we do. I've had quite a few customers that wanted to come out with us, and they're looking to get into tuna fishing themselves, but they wanted a lesson. You know, they wanted to be taken out and shown what somebody who does catch fish does when they get out there.
Right.
and it's always a constant discussion on how you're going to fish for them, where you're going to go. And so you can't really teach people, where to find the fish, but you can certainly teach them the methods that you use.
Yeah. I mean, you're not going to sit there and just catch fish or catch tuna like you're catching mackerel. It's just not, it's not the way it works. So there's some time that would be invested in learning how to catch tuna fish.
Right.
It's not just go out and slam them. It's not the way it works.
Absolutely. I mean, and I was listening to your podcast with Scott Ferrio, and he's exactly right. What he was talking about when he first got into going out and tuna fishing, you go out, catch nothing, go out, catch nothing, go out, catch nothing. And then one day you hook up, and if you've prepared and you successfully put them in the boat, you've got a lot of confidence to go back out there and do it again.
Right.
And, I know we see that with guys that we give a little bit of information to, we help them out, they catch fish, and all of a sudden they become a lifelong customer of yours because you gave them something that was an experience. And now they know you build rods. They say, I caught a fish last year, and I caught him on my 50, but I really want to do something different. And then all of a sudden you're selling them 80s or 130s, so it's a snowball.
Job security for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Excellent. As far as continuing on with the business, where do you see your business going?
I would definitely say that in the next 2 or 3 years, I have a normal everyday job. My dad's the primary rod builder. I would say in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to have this business built up to where it's a full-time job for the both of us, and we're probably going to be, even bringing on an employee. That's certainly what my goal would be.
Yep.
When you first start any business, you kind of look at it as a whole and you say, how do I take this idea and bring it to a profitable place? And then you start thinking about, well, if I can do that, how can I have an employee and be profitable? And that's really what my goal would be to be with the company, is that we grow this up, that, I have customers basically nationwide or worldwide even that are keeping us busy all year long. And, it's a good source of income for both my father and I, and possibly even employees. And then at some point, I wanted to, continue to, make the product line even better and have a little time to do some fishing and product testing myself. So.
Right. You said in the beginning that you take feedback from customers that bought your rods on how they performed, and then you kind of go back to the drawing board and redesign some aspects of them and try to make the rod better?
Yeah. I don't think we've ever had like an earth-shattering, like overwhelming, like, you completely made this rod the wrong way. I would never use that. They're just minor stuff from like the one of the first things that we ever had experience with is someone said, please move your first guide back closer to the grip so that when I'm shoveling or pulling the line in towards the reel while I'm cranking down on it, that my fingers don't get caught underneath the line in the grip.
Right.
It's pretty important,
Right.
I don't know if you fish with braided line or whatever, but that stuff will go right through your finger.
Absolutely.
So it's an important step. And, somebody said, I want it just a little bit different here. This is a little not soft enough, or it's too stiff. Then, maybe we're finding that we're changing blanks to better suit somebody's needs. We have customers that know exactly what they want. And then we have customers that don't know, the difference between, maybe an 80 or 130.
Right.
So our job is to educate them on that, or take the advice from other people who have a lot more knowledge in the fishing industry, people that have been fishing for the last 25 years, and use that to our advantage.
That's pretty cool. So you've got the experienced guy that can come to you and tell you what things they want to change, or specific things they like about the rods they're using now, and you can recreate that, and then you can take that knowledge that you already have and share it with somebody that's just kind of getting into it. You've kind of got the whole spectrum covered there.
Definitely. You would be so surprised at like the things that we do now because somebody said, what I would really like is if my rod had XYZ. And then you sit down, and nothing's final until you put the epoxy on it. So you lay out a rod and you're like, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. Maybe I'm going to start doing that, you know? And some stuff sticks, and then, you know, certain things you try and they don't stick. Like, we tried doing a spiral wrap stand-up, like an acid wrap type rod. That's what we do for our jigging rods, and it's great because there's no rotational force around the rod. So you can put your rod in the palm of your hand with a fish on, and the rod's not going to twist out of your hand. And then we tried it on a stand-up rod, and they make special guides for that, and we said, you know, we'll give it a shot. And we just happened to find that making that rod for us wasn't something that we wanted to do because of the amount of time and getting the guides just perfect so that when that rod bends, the line doesn't chafe on the guide.
Right.
You know, so it's a lot of trial and error. I mean, I always kind of poke fun at my dad every season. You know, the season will be over and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm gonna sell the 80s we used this year." And I said, "Dad, I love that rod. Why do you want to get rid of it?" "Well, we can make a new one." And it's like, "Oh yeah, I forgot."
That's funny. Now, as far as the names are concerned, you have different lines of rods that you're creating, and do you give them names?
That's a great question, because we are working on coming out with that hybrid styled 80-130 rod, and I was asking for some help on Facebook yesterday for names. You know, right now they're going to come in white and black, and my dad and I are thinking maybe White Lightning or Thunder Black or something like that. But in terms of series, no, we don't really have names. A lot of companies do name them, but you know, for us, it's, do you want a 130? Do you want an 80? Do you want a 50? I think that, you know, when you asked about the future of where we were going to end up, that could possibly be in there, naming our products, kind of giving them a way for us or our customers to easily identify with a certain style of rod.
Yep. I think we should name one the Bluefin Registry rod or something like that.
Oh, it might have to happen.
Okay. We'll see how many responses we get first, I guess.
Okay.
And as far, you touched on this just briefly, but I want to kind of recover it a little bit. As far as price, what should I expect for the low end to the high end, and maybe break it down into the different sizes?
Sure. So in terms of, you know, your basic rod, you can get into a custom, like I was saying kind of earlier about going to the store and looking at, you know, 80s and 130s from a manufacturer and being like, okay, I get the price. And then going and looking at the custom rods and being like, the price isn't really that far off. You know, why wouldn't I just have my rod made? So if you're to take a look at the most basic, we'll say the most basic 80 class rod, which will feature, all of our rods feature the same blank. We don't sacrifice the blank for your budget. So if you don't have a ton of money to spend and you're just looking to get into this, I'm not going to build you a rod on a crappy blank, because you're never going to come back to me and buy a better one.
Right.
Because you're going to be unhappy. So the blank is a really important part. But like I was saying, the guides also make up part of the expense, and also, you know, certain guides are going to last longer or whatever. So, all right. So like my basic tuna rod, like an 80 class, it starts around the $610 range. 610 is probably the bare bones rod with what we call Alps guides. They're imported by the Batson Enterprises, who make the Rain Shadow blanks, and they're CNC'd out of a solid piece of aluminum with recessed slots for the roller, so that if you are fishing with a braided style line, it's not going to get caught in there. They're certainly less expensive than an Aftco or a Winthrop guide, but I fish with them. I've caught fish on them. I'm impressed with how they work and their corrosion resistance. So they're perfectly fine. You know, that's why we offer them. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, on the top end, I'll give you a perfect example. We got into anodizing our guides. We got into sending them out, having them colored. We did this rod with a 130 with abalone, green abalone inserts, for the butt wrap instead of using thread. and the abalone inserts underneath each guide instead of using like a like trim band or whatever. And then we had the guides anodized in green, and the butt, the parts that screw onto your reel and actually hold the butt to the rod itself were anodized in green. Those went for $1,200 a piece. So it's one of those things you can get into it. I won't say it's cheap. I don't think there's anything cheap about tuna fishing, but a lot less expensive than the guy that's willing to spend $1,200 per rod.
Right. So somewhere between $700 and $1,200, depending upon the quality of the rod you're looking for.
Yeah, like $610 to $1,200. I mean, we could make one that costs $2,000 if you really wanted to.
Right.
But I don't think there's too many people out there that want to.
Right.
A lot of our commercial fishermen are using them to make money with. So for them, they're a tool or a piece of equipment.
Right.
And
here's the next question: how many rods do you need? Right.
I have a customer that in the year alone has bought 20.
Wow.
Yeah. That's that also is kind of a testament to the product itself, is that somebody who started with 10, fished with them, bought 5 more, bought 5 more, bought 5 more. This is a guy that fishes, down in, he fishes in the canyons.
Right.
Stand up. Then he wanted some jigging rods, and then he wanted some wireline rods. So, he believes in the product. And so to answer your question, how many rods you need, that guy needs 20. Whereas the guy on a 25-foot Mako needs 2.
Right. Gotcha.
It's just all I have.
Depends.
It's funny, because we build them. We obviously have kind of the advantage of fishing whatever we want, whenever we want. We have our favorites, but if we're going for mackerel, I've got a rod that I like to use specifically for mackerel. If I go tuna fishing, I'm obviously going to use my tuna rods.
Right.
I do have a jigging rod. We call it a vertical jigging rod. It's a 60 to 130 jigging rod. It's no thicker than, I would say, your pinky. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty thin rod, but I call that my do everything rod. You can go out on the party boat, you can catch cod and haddock with it, or you can bait cast and catch a striper on it, or you can throw a vertical jig on it and jig up some football sized tuna.
Gotcha.
So that's probably the only one rod that I would say that has more than a few purposes.
Gotcha. Seems extremely versatile.
Right.
Got it. Your guarantee.
Yes.
What do you guarantee?
So we guarantee the rod for life, and I mean the blank. And I don't care how you break it. If you break it because you put 50 pounds of drag on it and you're at the boat with a shark and it breaks in half, I don't care. I'm going to take your rod back, put all your components back onto a new blank. The only thing that we do charge for is the labor. Now, if you've had it for a month and it breaks, I'm not charging you anything. If it breaks 5 years from now, I'm going to rebuild it for you. The only thing you're going to pay for is the labor. And it's really, you're not talking about hundreds of dollars. You're probably talking about $50.
Okay. All right. So the labor is fairly inexpensive.
Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things that we don't charge a lot for. We're able to produce enough in the parts themselves to make it worth it to guarantee them like that. Right. I have had it happen. Only once, somebody on a stand-up rod. It's the only rod that ever broke. They had a shark on a stand-up rod at the boat. The swivel was stuck in the tip. I can't speak for anybody's rigging, and they had the drag up. So when they went, the fish tried to go one way, and somebody tried to reel it in the other way, and they basically busted in half. And we rebuilt that for him. So
what if somebody walks in with half a rod and the other half is at the bottom of the ocean?
Again, if it's you bought it 30 days ago, I'm actually going to buy the guides myself and make you a new rod.
Right.
If you've had it for a little while longer, it breaks in half. Breakages happen. Usually they're preventable. But they do happen. If the other half's at the bottom of the rod and you've had it for a couple of years, I mean, you're probably going to have to buy the guides.
Right.
You know,
I
the
mean,
guides, like I said, they're the most expensive part of the whole.
there's got to be some give and take, though, I guess, in a sense. Like if you're not applying the right drag or you're too much, I mean, you're going to put too much stress on a rod and eventually it's going to break anyway.
Right. Well, but like I said, again, I don't care if you stepped on it, you know, and that happens. That's probably the number one way to break a rod right there would be to put it on the gunnel, back up and step on it, you know, and it's amazing. These rods are made to be bent, but they're not made to be like crimped. You know, they will snap in a heartbeat.
Sure. Right. Yeah. Anything's you can only put so much pressure on certain things.
Right.
Yep. What about like swivels coming back up and getting stuck? You seems like you had a solution for that based off of the size of the guides and stuff like that. But
yeah, it doesn't happen often. You know, and obviously I'll say the way that I'm rigging is I'm using a crimp to a spro wind on swivel, and then to a crimp to my leader. And as long as the line is tight and you've got a nice good tip, that leader will go right down the rod onto the reel and you'll be fine. You know, obviously the last thing you want happening is a swivel to get caught in the tip, because by that point you're pretty much ready for the end game. You know, you got maybe another 15, 20 feet of line to go before the fish is, you know, getting harpooned.
Right.
The Aussie tip that Winthrop Tool Guide makes is massive. You can't get a swivel stuck in it.
Nice. That's cool.
I don't want to say can't. That's a scary word to say because
I'm sure there are a few that could.
Yeah, I mean, if you're using like mega huge crimps on 300 pounds,
sure.
But that's a different style of fishing. I don't know anybody that's fishing with 300-pound line.
Right. So it could happen, but it's extremely unlikely. Gotcha.
Very unlikely.
Okay.
I mean, even with an AFCO, it's not all that likely.
Gotcha.
You know, the types of guides that we're using are worlds apart from, you know, what people used to think of the perfect guide. You know, AFCO makes a fantastic guide. It's just not our preference. The guides that we use are Bigfoot guides. They're all CNC'd out of solid aluminum. Their corrosion protection is fantastic. You still have to maintain them, just like any other guide.
Right.
They look amazing. They function amazing. I mean, some of those guides you can, like I said a few times, you can literally stick a pencil in between the guide, the top of the guide, and the roller itself.
Gotcha. Do you mix and match between the guides and the tip? As far as brands?
Yes and no. I won't mix and match like the guides down the rod, but you say that, you know, say you bought a rod with an Alps set of guides, you wanted the Aussie top, I wouldn't question it. If you wanted to put an Aussie top on there, that's fine.
Okay.
I might question you if you put a full set of Winthrops on and then you decide that you want to put a Alps rollerball bearing top on. That would probably be a red light, but the tip is important.
Gotcha. Okay. So you could do like an Aussie tip and the rest in one brand of rollers.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
To experience this awesome sport, no matter what rod you're using, is to either take a charter with somebody or get out there and do it, and you'll be hooked.
Okay.
And then buy rods from us because you're going to need them.
I thought of one other thing about just general maintenance. If you own one, what kind of maintenance do you recommend? Just to keep it up and running. You hose it down with fresh water at the end of every trip and a little oil, grease, and
the salt water is the number one enemy of pretty much anything. You know, you're going to want to wipe it down at the end of the day. You can wash it with soap and water, soft brush. In terms of the guides, you know, that's a once a year thing. You take them apart, you clean them up, you put some new grease on them, you slap them back together, just to get the salt out of there. In terms of the butts and stuff, you can, you know, use a metal product for aluminum that, you know, keeps them corrosion free. They don't have a particular one that I could tell you, but, you know, just keeping it clean. eventually it's going to get banged on a railing or it's going to get scratched. And the other thing is they can always be refinished. I've taken 30-year-old rods that, they look terrible and turned them into something that looked like maybe it was only 4 or 5 years old.
Okay.
So they can all be, in a way, brought back to life. But the best way to keep them nice is just to clean them when you're done with them and put a rod sock on them when you put them in the boat.
Okay. And do you take trade-ins?
No.
Okay.
Because we aren't a retailer, we wouldn't really have the marketplace for that.
All right. What if it was one of your own rods? Would you take your own rod back in exchange?
It's possible.
Yeah. It
really depends. Sometimes we do that. We have like a guy that'll, he'll buy 130 and he decides that he wants a 80. If he buys it directly from us, I'm probably going to take it back and I'll probably spiff that other rod up and sell it.
Okay.
If it's another brand, no. But that's also why we work with retailers. We work with Hudson's Outboard up in Salisbury, Mass. We work with Goose Hummock down the Cape. He's probably one of our biggest customers right now. We work with Three Lanterns down in Gloucester. And we're always trying to grow that network. We work with Saco Bay, which I don't know too many people that haven't heard of Saco Bay. If you're into tuna fishing, then you probably know who they are, because I know as a kid that was the place to buy a rod. Now they're buying rods from us.
Okay. So you're out at different retail locations, selling them wholesale.
Yes.
Gotcha. Awesome. Jeff, thanks for joining us tonight.
I appreciate it.
That was awesome. We really appreciate it. Wish you best of luck on the ocean and fishing. Hopefully you have some tails up going on out there.
I will definitely share with you guys, because I know we can put the photos up online.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm trying to get some more photos, more stories. And at some point, we'd like to have you back on the show just to talk about the rods and the performance on the boat.
Sure.
As you're actually fishing, and then share the actual story behind the fishing, anywhere from what time you get up to the time you actually hooked up.
Love to.
Kind of stuff. So, Jeff, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Bluefin Registry's Tails Up podcast.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. That was Captain Jeff Fonts, or Jeffrey Fonts, from Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters down in Newburyport, Massachusetts. Hopefully that really filled in a lot of the questions you have about rod building and where you can get good custom rods and all the things you needed to know about getting a custom rod made for your fleet and all your tuna fishing adventures and even other types of fishing. So if you want to reach out to those guys, I know Jeff talked about some contacts, but you can reach them on Facebook at Real Easy Custom Rods and Charters. They're also on Twitter at Real Easy Rods. That's their handle. And so reach out to those guys if you're looking to hook up with a good rod. And we actually worked out a very special feature with Jeff and Real Easy Custom Rods. If you mention the Bluefin Registry podcast when you go to buy a rod, you automatically get 10% off. So make sure you mention that you listen to this podcast. You're gonna have a great rod made for you. So that's it. That's a wrap for us, guys. If you want to reach out to us at the Bluefin Registry, you can reach us at bluefinregistry.com. You can also reach us at Twitter, which is Bluefin Registry, and on Facebook, facebook.com/Bluefin Registry, or you can always shoot us an email at j@bluefinregistry.com. So tails up, everybody. See you next time.